If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. Again, daily camp nuggets, except when they don't practice, like today as I record this, but pretty much every day. And then I will be up at the Jets practice against the Jets on Thursday. So I'm going to have a live stream after that one. I know the 2 o'clock time is rough, so we're going to go 4 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday with a live stream show. Join me then. Hopefully that's better for you. I'm going to be doing live stream shows on Monday and Tuesday as well, probably later in the day on those two, so we can get more people to come in, ask questions, etc. So anyways, 4 p.m. Eastern time, wrapping up the joint practice with the Jets. Tune in for that one. A lot to learn in that practice. I'm looking forward to that one for the obvious reasons. It's going to really reveal a lot about where this team is at. And last year against the Rays, and actually in a minute, I'm going to get into what we've learned so far throughout camp and what we still need to learn. But I do want to start with the joint practice because it's going to reveal a lot about this team. And like last year, it's funny though, because last year I felt like at times the offense looked fine, right? And that Sam Howell had a pretty good day on some of those, but there's so many things you just didn't see because the way they call the game in practice was not necessarily how they called it during the season, and the emphasis on throwing the ball, etc. And there are also times where you can't tell the impact of the pass rush necessarily on a play, because there are times where in every practice that I've ever attended, that there are times where a quarterback might break out of a play and say, well, the DN pulled up because they knew they had him sacked. And that's happened a couple of times. That happened a couple of times the other day where Jaden Daniels emerged from a situation where it's like, yeah, I probably would have gotten sacked there because it was a nice stunt by the D-line, whatever it was. So it's hard to sometimes measure things in practice because in a game, they're going to play out the sack. But I did think that the offense had a solid, or better than decent showing, I guess, against the Ravens, especially. They had two days, and one of them I thought was pretty good. The defense, I felt like it struggled. And I felt like Emmanuel Forbes in particular showed that he had a ways to go, that he kept getting burned by some of the vets, notably Odell Beckham. And not that there's shame in that necessarily, but it was a little bit too much because half the time, I wasn't always focused on the defense there because you want to watch the development of the offense. But anyways, the point is, it's revealing. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what this practice reveals about where Washington is at. Now, we know a lot of things have changed. The vibe is much better, but you still want to know at some point about the product in the field. How much different will that be? And I would also say I would caution to drawing too many conclusions for myself and for anybody else, because we're still talking about the first couple of weeks of a new program, first couple of weeks of training camp of a new program. And it takes time to put things together, and with a rookie quarterback and going against one of the best defenses in the NFL last season in the Jets. So there's going to be stuff to learn, but you cannot go overboard in what you see or don't see. I would always go back. The one thing I learned, I remember going way back, sometimes it's more about individual stuff. And even Joe Witt talked about that on Tuesday, how really in these situations, you want to see how they compete. You're going to get beat. You're going to make a bad play. How do you respond? Like, they're not calling a game to win. They're not calling the game to do this. They're calling to see things about individual people, or certainly, obviously, you want to play situational, but you want to see what does somebody offer in this sort of a situation, right? What is their mindset? Are they competitive? Do they get punched in the face? Do they get back up and fight? Like, not literally, but that's the kind of stuff they want to see. And the one thing, so I think it's not, so that's why I say you have to caution some of that. So look, when I'm watching for it, that's what I want to look for too. Okay, If a guy has a bad play, what does he do next? If Jaden Daniels messes up, what does he do on the next play? Or Brandon Coleman, whomever it is, what do they do in response? And you can learn about the group as well. If they're having big issues over here on X, Y, or Z, then you can say, okay, the O-line's getting this or that, or the D-line's not doing this, or the cornerback's this, whatever it is, you can see. But I do think it's a lot about, again, they're not game planning. Neither team is game planning. It's situational, and it becomes about, you want to learn about your players as much as anything. And one thing too, and somebody asked me this, and I think one of the comments about this, and I've talked a little bit about it, but I do think that one of the things that's key in these joint practices is how the individual coaches handle them and how you pair them up. And they want to have it be somebody that they have a good working relationship with, so that way you can kind of coordinate what if Dan Quinn says to Robert Saleh, listen, hey, we really want to work on this, and this, and he'll say, okay, good. I'll tailor this. This portion of the drill will have you guys work on that, and we'll do this. And then Saleh might say, well, we really kind of need some help here, or want to see on some things there. And then Quinn will kind of tailor what they're going to do accordingly during those sessions. So they're going to get a chance to work on some of that. And that's, again, one of the beauties of the joint practices compared to a preseason game, where you let the game play out. And there's value in that too, because it's an unpredictable situation. But in the joints, you can really work on specific things. So I think but it does take coordination from the coaches and cooperation from the coaches, because without that, then I think it's harder to learn about your team. And I don't think you're going to have a good situation if you don't get that. And we, over the years, I've learned a lot from these. I talked a lot about the Patriots, the difference in demeanor between the Patriots and, at the time, the Redskins under Jay Gruden in his first year, Belichick in I think it was his 15th year. But it was still, I think if Belichick had been in his first year, there still would have been a difference in how each camp approached things, and just the business-like manner of the one that really I wouldn't describe as business-like. And then, you see when the Texans come into town, you learn about individuals, you learn about, you learn what guys can do. Brandon Sheriff, he was not a right tackle. He gets moved to guard after that, becomes an all-pro. So you learn about various individuals. And I remember even, you go back, again, I go back to the Patriots and just watching how they practice, and it really opened your eyes, like, okay, that's how it's supposed to look. And, so there you go. Anyway, so we got the joint practice coming up, and I'll be up there, and I'll do the live stream at 4:00 after that. They got the game on Saturday. I'll have another podcast out Friday, kind of leading into the game, and then have another one after the game. The video will come out for that Sunday morning, and the podcast will actually come out Saturday night. Anyways, let's get to what we've learned in camp so far. And I'll just kind of go down a list, and some of the stuff I've talked about, but I do think it's worth, like, what have we learned? What do we still need to learn? And so let's go. What we've learned, Jaden Daniels has won over teammates. Like, they really are impressed with his work ethic, with the way he approaches things, with his demeanor. I think all that stuff has been really good. And I continue to say, like, that's the stuff that's going to help build his game, his relationship with his teammates, and really kind of, he's not somebody who, people gravitate toward him, and more than most guys. And I think, like, Alex Smith had that, right? Alex Smith was just a really good natural leader. And I think they're different, and they're not the same guy at all, but you had guys who gravitate toward that leadership. And I think with Smith, there was a lot of trust in who he was, what he had done, what he could do. I think with Daniels, he wins them over. He's got the personality, and players have said that they're seeing that more and more come out, and just the always upbeat, always smiling, laughing, and et cetera. Like, there's a way that you do that, but also getting guys to come work with him. So I think you see guys gravitating toward that, which is a very positive development. Why do they do that? It's not just because, and I would say it's not just because he has this fun personality. It's because, listen, the veterans want to see a guy who works. If you're Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz, if you're not seeing a guy who works, you're not gravitating toward that. So it first and foremost is about them. And, Kingsbury's talked about how well he knows the playbook. We talked about that yesterday on the live stream. But I think that's one of the primary things we've learned. Then we see, you see the talent, don't know when it's going to pay off, don't know where he'll get to. I think we still need to learn more about that, just because you need to see him against a different team. Like you cannot, I'm not going to make grand pronouncements about his future based off what we've seen just in practice. I think he can be a good quarterback, but you need to, I think he will be a good quarterback, but you need to see him against other teams. And I do think that the other stuff, the foundation to me is really, really important. And I've harped on that all along because I've seen too many quarterbacks here, young quarterbacks who do not lay that foundation. And I think ultimately it gets them in the end. This one, Jayden Daniels has laid that foundation. And I think that's going to be why he's going to max out as a quarterback, whatever level that is, because of the foundation that I think he is laying since he's been here, not just this camp, but in the spring as well. And that, like, if you want to take something, that to me is the number one thing to take, because without that, you're not going to have a chance for any sort of success. You could have, maybe some really good games, maybe a really good year, but you're not going to have sustained success without that foundation. And I think he's got. For the entire month of August, the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is offering multiple ways to save on climbing and zip lining and 50% off axe throwing. There are only a few Sundays left without football, so it's time to get that last summer adventure on the schedule. There's no better place to spend the last few days and nights of the summer with friends and family. Don't just take our word for it. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring was named the #1 aerial adventure park in North America by USA Today. Anytime you're thinking about reaching new heights, make sure you know before you go. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is the only ACCT accredited park in Maryland or Virginia. So there you have it, folks. For the rest of the summer, you can get the best climbing, zip lining, and axe throwing in the country, up to 50% off right here in the DMV. Reserve your adventure today at www.theadventurepark.com/kind. So the other one is what we've learned is about the vets, the impact of the vets. And I'm talking about guys like Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner, Austin Ekeler. There has been nothing during camp to suggest that, oh my gosh, these guys are just done. I haven't seen that. Now, you can wonder about, at this stage of their careers, you always wonder about durability. Zach Ertz has had some injuries the last couple of years that's prevented him from finishing the seasons, but he looks good. And he looks, as they pointed out the other day, he's very quarterback friendly. And by that, like, he knows where to sit in the zone. He's very good at knowing how to use leverage and creating a better window for a quarterback, but also the trust to throw to him. Like, he's had a couple one-handed grabs in practice. He gets open. He can make the contested catch. They trust him. So I think he's going to be a really good target for a young quarterback. Again, the durability, can't predict that, but I think that's the one thing to watch for him. And like Wagner, the impact has been really, really big, just in part because of leadership, but also the knowledge and just the trickle-down effect of that knowledge on those around him. So is he still the same all-pro guy that he was in Seattle a few years ago? Maybe not. But can he be an effective player here? It certainly looks that way. It's from what we've seen in practice and what we've seen and felt from other teammates. I think the same thing is true with Ekeler. Now, I will always caution with running backs, until you see them in a game, it's really, really hard to know. So out on the practice field, when you're not getting hit to the ground, it's really difficult. So I would say he looks quick. I think you've seen some sharp cuts. That to me is what I'll focus on, because I think the overall effectiveness remains to be seen again in games. I think there are some spots that are just hard to tell, and running back is one of them. Now, I remember when Alfred Morris was a rookie, I think one of the things I always liked was you could see the forward lean that he always had, and it was more of a style and mindset. And so you thought, okay, I like that, but you still don't know until you get in a game and then how they're being used, et cetera. But I think he can help. So I think those three can have a positive impact here and serve the purpose for why they wanted them here in the first place. Then you have some of the free agent signings. I think the number one guy that would jump out there is Frankie Louvu. I think you see the speed that he plays with, and I think there's an explosiveness to his game that I think they haven't had at linebacker in a while. So I think that's going to be a positive development as well, and how they use him in the pass rush with that speed. The one thing I like about him, watching him on film from Carolina, is that for a linebacker, I think he has a good feel for the pass rush. I think he rushes with a plan. I think he knows how to set some guys up. I've seen him do that in games where you're using this move, this move, this move, and then later in the game, boom, you're going to something else off of that. So I think, I think that's good for him, but I think he's going to be a guy that can help. Certainly, I think a decent amount. And I think then you can look at like Tyler Biadasz. I like that signing. I liked it at the time, and I think it's been a solid signing. It's a good one for a young quarterback to have a veteran center in front of him to help with the protection, but just in general in the huddle, like a guy who can organize that huddle. I think he's going to be a good move. I think it's a good fit in that interior for these guys. I like the interior they've built, but I'll get more to the O-line in a minute. And I think Allegretti is going to be fine at left guard. I don't know to what level. It's really hard to say. I mean, again, see him in a game, and he hasn't been a full-time starter like this. So it's a new role for him. They gave him money like he could be an effective starter, but not so much that it's a guarantee that so we'll see on him. But I do think that it's an upgrade over what they've had, and to what level, that remains to be seen. The D-line chemistry, I think, has been a good development, and Joe Witt talked about that the other day, and just how coordinated they have looked during practices with their pass rushes, and how important that chemistry is in getting guys to buy in as a group. And as we know, that has not been the case here for the last several years. That was not the case here for the last several years. There was always a reluctant buy-in, whether it's because of what the D-line coaches were asking them to do, to be honest. Like, they fought that hard for the first couple of years under Sam Mills Jr. And that was not a good hire or fit. And I think with this group, I think they like what they're being taught, and just the freedom I think they have with what they're being taught. It's not you have to do this. It's here's what we're suggesting. Try this. If it doesn't work for you, okay. But your job is to get from point A to point B, and in the most effective way as possible. If you're not getting from point A to point B, there's going to be problems. And if you're getting from point A to point B with your technique, okay. If you're not, then you better try this one. So I think there's some of that is going on, but it's also, I think there's more. I think you have maybe a more workmanlike attitude on the ends. And I think Montez Sweat was fine with all that, by the way. I think Chase Young bucked at that. But I don't think it was just a matter of, okay, I think there was the whole group as a group did not do that. I think it sounds like they're doing that now. If that plays out during the season, that's a positive development for them. And if not, we'll find out. But early on, I think that's been something that seems to be evident. Some of the stunts look like they've been pretty good. But again, let's see it against the Jets in the joint practice, in the game, and then against the Dolphins. And there we go. I like the development of Brandon Coleman and Mike Sainristil in particular. Coleman certainly looks like he can play. Now, I'll get to some of what we need to learn about that in a minute, but I do think, I like his footwork. I think he plays with a good base and good balance. And I think that allows him to, he's not getting knocked back a lot. Don't see that too much. I mean, sometimes you're going to see a guy beating him for sure, but you do see the ability to anchor and all that. So I do think he can play. I think part of me, the question then becomes, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I do think he can play in the league. But I'll get Sainristil. I really like what he's shown. Very balanced. Now, you see in some of the one-on-ones, he's going to get beat. I mean, that's, those are a hard one for a defensive back. But I do think he can play inside, and I like the mindset that he has. He's been as advertised with all that. So that's been a good development for them as well. I think there's other rookies that look like they're going to be able to help, whether it's this year or in the future. They're not all going to do something this year. I like Jordan McGee, but need to see more. And he's a backup right now. I like Hampton, again, backup. What does he do down the road? I think those are guys that you look at. Can they be special teams guys? Can they be, and by the way, that's why I go back to Sainristil too. I like him in that area quite a bit. I think he's shown that he has an all-around game that he can help in multiple ways. And I think that's why I really kind of like him, is that when you watch him in some of those special teams drills, I think he does a good job competing. And that's what they, again, want to see first and foremost. Ben Sinnott, I think he can help in a variety of roles, especially as a blocker. I think he adds a physical presence. I think, there's still more to learn about him as a pass catcher. You're not seeing him just, he's not like, I don't think he's flashing in a huge way and just like, oh my gosh, another big catch by Sinnott. I don't think we're seeing that yet, but I do think we're seeing the other aspects of what he adds in the versatility of his game, and then how does he build on that. So I think that's what we've seen so far with him. And I think the other thing that's been a positive development for this group and for this defense is the communication. Far better than it has been. I think you can attribute that to the emphasis by the coaches. I think Bobby Wagner plays a big role in that. Jeremy Chinn plays a big role in that. But I think it's also, it's not just, you cannot just have a couple guys talking. It's got to be boom, boom, boom. I think Quan Martin was good with that at the end of last season. I think it's going to be a good thing for him. I think Samra still will be good with that. So I think there are multiple players who have a role in them, and that makes a difference. So it starts with Wagner, I think, but then there's others that matter. And I do think it's a massive emphasis by these coaches, way more than it was certainly last year. Like you did not hear the chatter that you do now. And I think that's one way that you can improve as a defense is simply by communication, because then you can get on that, you're in alignment, right? And as the coaches always say, listen, if you're on the same page, you make a mistake, you still have a better chance for success, because guys, if you have 8, 9 guys doing one, playing one thing and 2 guys playing another, there's going to be a breakdown and it's going to be a big play. But you can limit that if you're communicating and you're all quote unquote same page. And, so I think that's been a very positive development for sure. And I would by the way, I'm going to throw Jeremy Chinn back in there with the vets. I think he's going to help. I like the versatility that he has to play in the box. I also think it's harder, again, when I talk about running backs, I think it's sometimes hard to learn about the safeties, because really, I'll go back to Troy Apke a few years ago. Apke looked pretty good in camp during practice, because there's not full hitting. You're facing the same offense over and over. You know what you're doing. And then you get in the game and the angles were just bad. And so then you learn, okay, it's not there. But in practice, I'm telling you, he looked better, right? So it's hard. So that's where you have to say, okay, keep that in mind when you're watching somebody else. But Chinn has a track record. And I do think the versatility and the size in the box can help them. It can expand what they want to do defensively. And I think that's where a guy like Hampton's development will be interesting, because he can play that role in the future if he continues to develop.
Hey, it's Bram Weinstein here, voice of the Commanders, and of course, frequent guest of this podcast, The John Keim Report. I wanted to let you all know that my show, which airs at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on ESPN 630, is now exclusively produced by Empire Media, my company, and is going to be distributed through our network. So I'm asking you, please, if you subscribe to this show and love this show, give mine a try as well. Subscribe to The Bram Weinstein Show wherever you get your podcasts, and many of the shows and many of the elements that are in the show will be available on the Empire Media YouTube channel. We're going to talk a ton of Commanders and other DC sports. Check it out.
So what we're still learning, offensive line. I'll go back to Coleman, and can he be a starting left tackle in this league right away? Because that's where he's trending right now. I mean, he's opening up as the first left tackle in this group. Is he trending that way? I think, right, but how does it look against, this is why the Jets practice is key. How does he look against a different defense and then some speed rushers at some point? So Washington doesn't necessarily have that kind of guy on the roster. Like Dorrance Armstrong, solid end. Cleveland Farrell, solid end. Dante Fowler, good backup, situational pass rusher kind of guy. But we're not talking an elite pass rusher. So what's Coleman going to look like there? That's going to be part of the adjustment as well. But I think if you have good technique, you can at least compete in those areas, and they can help you with the play calling. That's allowed. It wasn't happening last year. But I think there's still more to learn about the O-line. Andrew Wiley has missed a lot of time with that tightness, and we still have to learn more about the tightness. They do not have to tell us about injuries at this point, so it's just going to be labeled as tightness. So, but he hasn't been out there, and I don't think they have, a guy that, Trent Scott is not going to be pushing him at right tackle. Cornelius Lucas, could he do that? Would the offense be worse? Well, we'll see. But Lucas, I think, remains. We know what he is, and I think he's good at what he does. But Wiley hasn't been out there. So there's still questions about both tackle spots. How much better will Wiley be under this scheme? Will it change? Because at some point there's technique that you have to execute. And there were times with Wiley last year, it wasn't just, hey, they're throwing the ball a lot and you're having issues. There's sometimes where it was just, they would complain about like the technique. Maybe you're opening up your feet too much and leaving yourself vulnerable to an inside rush, right? And that would go on. That's an individual thing. You've got to get better there. So we don't know yet. We haven't seen him in those one-on-ones. And so, but that's why I say I like the interior of the line. I still have questions outside. I feel good about Coleman's development, but you still need to learn more to say, okay, go. But if he develops, man, they have 2 premium spots filled if Daniels plays well as well. So, but still more to learn about that group. And also then what the impact on the scheme is overall on that group and how much it can help them improve, and how can the play calling help them. We still have to learn more about that to say like, okay, problem solved. They seem to feel better about the line internally than fans or others do, right? Or media, whomever. They seem to feel better about that. But I do think the other part of the problem is there's been a disruption on that front because of Wiley's been out. Sam Cosmi's been out, missed because of illness. Then you have, then there's been a little bit of shuffling because of that, and so I think that's led to some disruption and maybe a delayed development for this group as a whole. So I think like that's why, we're still learning about them. Is it a big problem? I can't say that it's a big problem because it's changed. And there's a lot of changes that go into making it good or bad. And the scheme is going to be a big part of that. And the play calling is a big part of that. But I think there's still more to learn about to say like, okay, they're headed in the right direction, because I think there's, again, the disruption has delayed the development. And then the getting to know more about the rookie, I think, is also part of that as well. The receiver depth, I think, is what kind of depth is there beyond Terry McLaurin? Has anybody really, really jumped out? And I don't think that anybody has really. I think Jahan Dotson has had some moments, and that's a good development. I'll be curious to see how they use him and just how they create. Because one thing these receivers talk about, and I think this goes back to Daniel's development, and Terry McLaurin talked about this with me, is just his ability to get guys the ball in a situation where they can run after the catch. And something that's ball placement, but it's also getting through your progressions at the right pace. If you do that, if you're a second or third read and you get to the second or third read at the right time, you're going to give that guy a chance to run after the catch. And so I'll be curious to see what happens with Dotson. But it's not like you're out here thinking, oh my God, this guy is just looking awesome. I mean, Luke McCaffrey's had some moments, but you can't say he's tearing it up either. Dyami Brown, he's done a couple of things, but you cannot say that, hey, this is the year for Dyami Brown. Haven't seen that. I think there are things that he adds on special teams in particular. And the deep speed, I think they're always going to like, but we've got to see it. So I think there's still questions about how deep is this group and what's the overall, and the guys like Bryson Tremaine and Mitchell Tinsley have shown some things, but are they guys that are going to, how much would they help during a regular season? We're talking about guys showing things in camp versus can they do that in the regular season? Every year there are receivers that flash in camp at the back end, and then you don't hear a lot from them beyond that. So can they be guys that contribute beyond this point? I think there's still more to learn there. And Zacchaeus, I think Zacchaeus has flashed, has certainly had some moments as well. So we'll see, but I think there's still more to learn about that group. And I brought up Coleman, some of that stuff. That's natural. I think the kickers, see them in a game, right? In practice, they look kind of even for now. And I think Riley Patterson, that would give him an edge because he's done it in games before. But let's see how they handle the games. Cornerbacks, I like you heard, if you listen to Benjamin St. Juste the other day, I like that how they simplified the rules, or maybe I hate that word simple because it makes sound, but I think they've clarified the responsibilities in a better way for these corners. And I think when you do that, you allow guys to play faster and all that. So that's good. And I think you're seeing that. I think it's been better, but I want to see them against a different receiving core and a good receiving core. Like, what are they going to do against Garrett Wilson? What are they going to do against the Dolphins next week with Waddle and Hill? I mean, so there's a lot more to learn that I think we're going to learn over the next week or so that will really reveal where are they really at. And then I think the other thing is, do they fit the physical nature of what this defense wants to be? That's one thing Joe Witz talked about, fast and physical. Is that Forbes and St. Juste? We'll see. but they're going to have to show that. So I think while I think it's been a positive development in camp, I think there's definitely still more to learn there. With the starting corners in particular, I think it's a little bit of a deeper group than last year, and I do think it'll be improved just from the, maybe having fewer breakdowns than they did last year because of the communication aspect, and again, the clarifying of the responsibilities in a better way. I think that all helps, but I think there's still to get to the point where you say, okay, these guys will be around for a couple of years. I think we're not at that point yet. And then I think the other one is there's two other things. Jamin Davis's experiment as defensive end, I just call that incomplete. You want to still give him some time to see, does he grow and how does it look when he goes up against another defense? Joe Witt said he feels like he's playing the run better. But I think you're putting him down there to be to help with the pass rush, period, right? That's what they're putting him down there for. So has he shown that he can do that yet? Not yet. And so you give him time, see where it goes, but in the early steps, like there's still more to learn about him in that role. And then Johnny Newton, the rookie, because of the foot issue, and then they brought him back, and we haven't seen him out there this week. I don't know that he'll do anything Thursday or Saturday. Don't know yet, but I think that's one where it's like we don't know. Like they like the pick. They did not. I don't think anybody knew about the injury or the foot issue when they picked him, because it was discovered after the draft and routine physical on his right foot to see how that was coming along. Anyway, but I think we don't know yet. I think you saw flashes of some of that quickness, but we haven't seen him in enough situations to say what he can do. And I don't know enough to say like when he's going to be in full. I mean, Dan Quinn, all he said is some days are going to ramp it up and some days are going to back off to try and get him ready for the season. So there's a lot more still to learn about Johnny Newton. Anyway, that's it for me, folks. Again, I'll be back at 4:00 Eastern time with a live stream show after the joint practice. There's going to be a lot to discuss. It's going to be a really good one. And I think we're going to get a really good education on Thursday. I'm looking forward to that. Love these kind of practices because you learn a lot. So join me then. Talk to you next time.